They say that talking to yourself is a sign of insanity. But I think that's only if you answer back, right? Right. This is Talking to Myself, the Art Advice podcast where I use anecdotes from my real life, try to make myself a better artist, and hopefully a better person. While others might also benefit from this, mostly I'm just trying to avoid paying for therapy. Today's podcast, I thought we'd talk a little bit about criticism, dealing with it, accepting it, understanding it, and generally trying to use it for what it's good for, which is to make you better at your art. The anecdote is a little strange. There was recently someone visiting my home who does not know me. They were an official there for a reason. It's not the police. Let me set the scene for you, though. I was waiting for them to show up because it was a scheduled appointment. I was wearing my work uniform, which is a distinctive uniform with the name of the company on it. I use a vehicle for work that was out in front of the place that they had to pass by to get in. That'll be important later. And I was, like I said, I was completely dressed for work. I was actually engaged in something that related to my work when they came in. So anyway, they came in. We had a brief conversation. They said some things about the place that were, on the surface, a little demeaning. I live in a small kind of what they call a granny flat in Australia. It's a 2-bedroom apartment, basically, but it's a sort of separated, isolated house. But everything in it's kind of miniaturized. It's got a tiny kitchen. It's got a tiny lounge, they call it here. Living room, central room, basically. And 2 small bedrooms, which is fine for me. The person here visiting took a look around and said, it's awfully small here, isn't it? And they couldn't seem to get over how tiny it was. It was like, well, there's one person living here. How many rooms do you need? Anyway, so I feel like I had, not that I'm on the defensive about the place. I know it's small. No big deal. It's kind of suits me because the more room I have, the more clutter I build up. You can see any discussion we've ever had about art supplies on that note. But they came around to the studio room and they took a look in. They thought that this room was used for storage before they looked at it. And I explained to them that I'm an artist and I do art online. And I create art commissions and drawing and painting and that kind of stuff. And they said, oh, that's a nice hobby, isn't it? Better than having to work all the time. Where do you work anyway? So I agreed with him. And I've swallowed down that argument that it instantly comes to mind with a knee-jerk reaction when someone says, hey, nice hobby you have there when it comes to art. Never mind that I'm trying to make this a living, trying to make a career out of it. It stings a little, but I put it aside quickly and just agreed and said, I work for this company. I didn't say that I'm wearing the uniform for, that you passed the vehicle for outside, that I was working for when you walked in the room. So they said their pleasantries, they finished up their task, and they left. Now, I've had this criticism of art, or my art, several times before, and sometimes from myself, even. Sometimes I talk to myself, hence the podcast. But I've had people say to me, art's a nice hobby. I'm glad that you have something fun to do besides work. I know other artists have dealt with this before. And of course, your first reaction is always going to be, this is work. I'm doing this for, a purpose, a commercial purpose. It's more meaningful than a hobby. I invest quite a lot of time, effort, and money into this hobby. I'm trying to produce things that are valuable to the world and that express something I'm trying to express. All kinds of reasons why it's more important than a hobby. Financial, emotional, societal, personal. But I'm glad I didn't immediately jump in and defend myself, because when I thought back about what this lady had said after she left, she's clearly not the smartest observer of detail, because she didn't notice that I worked for this company, which is, I can't think of any other way to demonstrate that I'm working for this company rather than, the only other thing could have been more is if I'd had a big sign saying I work for this company on the door. There were lots of little things like that. I know there's a language barrier. We share a common English language, unfortunately, here in Australia, and I'm from America. But she didn't know what a kitchen faucet was. I'm assuming that if I'd said tap, she probably would have understood. But surely Australians aren't completely unfamiliar with the concept of the word faucet to not know what it is. Like I had to say it 3 times and then I pointed to it because she didn't know what I was talking about. So, you know, thinking back on these things, maybe her criticism of my art as non-professional wasn't as meaningful as it felt like when she first said it. I'm sure she's a wonderful person, great at her job. She could be a Rhodes Scholar for all I know. I have no idea. I don't know this lady. But I have evidence in the same conversation where I was offended slightly to realize that she probably didn't mean any offense. And her opinion or criticism is probably not worth me paying attention to. So that happens a lot with art. Even if you're asking for direct criticism from people who are qualified, you need to keep in mind what they're saying and who they are at the same time. I was always told to try to find people I respect artistically to get criticisms from. And it's also valuable to have criticism from people who don't have experience with art to make sure you're communicating what you're trying to say. You know, and like, can they tell that's a bicycle or whatever it is? You know what I mean? That's the base level technical stuff. Can they tell that it's a good enough art visual representation of what you're trying to say that they can understand what it is? And then are they getting the message that's a slightly deeper level? And then technical stuff is more where you want the more professional opinions from other artists and things like that. Because you can show a painting with very poor brushwork to an amateur or just an art appreciation person, and they'll be like, "That's great. I really like it. I like the lights playing on things, and I like the colors and things like that." They don't get into the nitty gritty of the brush details, or maybe they don't care about the colors and the light. They just like the message. You know, that kind of stuff's great. It's useful. So seeking criticism from people who aren't necessarily the most skilled in the area is still a good idea. However, when it comes to negative criticism, especially, it's really important to consider the person's opinion based in what you know about them and what they probably know about what they're talking about. In this case, that lady's probably not an art collector. I'm willing to bet, especially illustrations and, you know, lowbrow pop stuff like I do, surrealism, horror, whatever you want to call it, the oddball stuff that I do, creatures and monsters and things with big teeth. She's probably not got any of that at her house, which would put her in the solid majority. But it also puts her in a category of people who I don't have to listen so much to their opinion of what the value of my art is. Because it's not for them. You know? No shame in that on either side. But it's important to avoid that knee-jerk reaction that I had, for sure. So, here's the part where I talk directly to myself. Hey, self. This is past self. Yeah, things are still pretty rotten. Hopefully they're better where you are now. Did that vaccine work? Or did it start a plague that everyone's vampires now? I've seen too many movies. At any rate, remember, future self, that immediate reactions are probably not the best ones, so hold your tongue. Unless someone asks you a direct question, hold your tongue when someone says something like your art is a good hobby, but it's not a job. Don't think about answering right away. Just take it in, think about who's saying it, and realize the importance of it based on that. And then when they leave, you can talk shit about them all you want. Thanks everybody for listening. I really appreciate you hanging out. Hopefully this has been a bit of use to you. If you're an artist especially, I hope that this helps you overcome those feelings you get when people either intentionally or inadvertently glad hand you or make you feel less accomplished than you really are. Special thanks to my patrons on Patreon. You guys get to hear and see these a week before everyone else, and you are the shiniest people I know. Till next time, everybody take care. Do what you gotta do to stay safe, and make the best stuff you can, regardless of what anyone says. I'll catch you next time.